the 133rd episode of Silicon Zombies, where you get the best brains from the Bay and beyond. Super psyched to have Mike Aymar here. We're going to be exploring a little bit about stories of the Valley, and really excited to have some insight into what's coming next as well. So before we go any further, I want to do a quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors. We've got Primero Negocios, which is our marketing and growth engine. So if you have a product, if you have a service, and you're looking to get more customers, Primero Negocios is the team to talk to. We've also got Nicodex. So if you're looking to build a product, definitely check these guys out. They've done amazing work for our community, and they're both based in Mexico. Grateful for the support. And of course, we're here at the beautiful Park James Hotel. So quick shout out for the Park James. Woo! And without any further ado, what do you think, Owen? You want to kick us off here?
I do. Well, your resume is insane. I think it would be best if you gave us a little bit of your background, told us who you are, how you got your start, and we'll get into like the details, but just so people understand who's sitting here, who's talking to us this evening.
Help us set the table, Mike.
What's that? Okay, so Mike Aymar, went to Stanford, graduated in '69. Got into computers early. I got turned on by computers. I liked small computers, not these big IBM things that were behind a glass wall. None of you ever did this, but you used to go to the computer center and they give them a deck of cards, and then an hour later they give you a big printout, and that's how you use the computer. I got into mini computers, then I got it, and I did that for quite a while. At Stanford, I ended up teaching a course at the time as an instructor. I wasn't a professor. About using the computer as a laboratory instrument. This is a mini computer. And that's what I ended up doing in industry. And so I went out into industry. Actually, I was invited, in quotes, by the Dean of Engineering to go out into industry because I was hanging around too long. It was really a lot of fun to just stay in school, have part-time jobs, and it was, your tuition was paid. You could just take courses. It didn't last long. They caught on to it. So I went out into industry. I figured, hey, I'm an engineer. I'm a digital engineer, hardware and software, small computers, and I figured I'm going to go get a new job every year. I'm going to go be an engineer here for 2 years. And then after 2 years, I'll probably go to another company because that's how you get a raise. And then I'll go to another company. Well, my second company was Intel, and I stayed there 26 years. It was awesome. I mean, it fit my personality perfectly. There's one guy, at least one guy here. Well, James is one. Chip, they knew the Intel culture, and it's a very confrontive culture. It's an amazing culture. It had amazing discipline and so forth. We'll get more into that later. And I stayed there 26 years and retired in 2002 because even that got old, even though it was one of the best jobs I ever could have had. Could have had? Yeah. So could have. Whatever. You understood it.
So you got to shape one of the most impactful companies around. And when you started, they were doing $250 million in revenue yearly, and now their market cap is over $100 billion or thereabouts. So how have you seen things change, and help us understand a little bit into the ethos of Intel and this confrontational culture that you mentioned, Mike?
So when I joined as an engineer, and I designed this little thing that was like in a briefcase. And this is before the PC, if anybody can imagine that ever happening, let alone cell phones. So before the PC, we sold microprocessors. They went into industrial control products, typically, like gas station pumps, cow milking machines, all sorts of weird stuff. And people would use these microprocessors, 4004, 8008, just to reduce the amount of logic chips. It was easier to do in some cases. I did that. I designed this product. It basically failed after about 2 years. It was supposed to be for field technicians to work on the products, the gas station pump, that they had to go fix it. And there's a microprocessor in there, so why not? Well, they just replaced boards and panels and whatever they had to replace, and then took them back to the factory and let those guys fix them. So there was no marketing involved at the time. It was just an idea we had about ways to push our processors further, and that kind of gave me a lesson that you got to know more about your product than just engineering. There's so many. Most of you must know this. This is like 101, right? I mean. You want to be a lateral thinker, in my opinion. You want to understand manufacturing, marketing, engineering, channels and so forth. You got to get close to your customers, and we'll talk more about this later, I guess. And I learned that at Intel. And so I moved from here. I must have had a dozen different jobs at Intel over those years. Basically, I came close to the average of 2 years for every job, but they were inside Intel. So that's kind of where it was, and it was a great culture.
Yeah, let's talk about the culture because the world has changed so much in the last 4 years. When we were doing the prep call, you told us how accountable you were, especially when you had an idea. Walk us through those conversations. How did it go when you wanted to present something? What was the feedback you got? What was the resistance? Tell us about some of the fights. Like, really help us understand the culture that you kind of learned your craft in.
So it was a very direct culture. It was based on discipline, results, and data. You can't manage something if you can't measure it. It was a very fundamental thing. And so if you had an idea, you could challenge anybody. At the time, I was here. I could challenge my boss. I could challenge my boss's boss. And if you had a good idea, there was a lot of give and take. We called that constructive confrontation. It wasn't always constructive, but it was confrontation. It was like, and I'm serious. There were lots of one story, for example. So this is when I was on a vice president. We'd have these executive staff meetings, what they were called, and they oftentimes turned into big arguments. And Andy Grove was the CEO at the time, who was just the most amazing manager I ever worked for. Sorry to Dave House, who's going to speak here next time. Dave was maybe second or third. I can't remember. And I'm glad I get to take the first punch. I just remember you'd get in arguments with Andy, and if you had a good idea and you had data, he wanted it. I can't remember the school of teaching, but it goes back to Greece. It might have been Socrates or one of those guys. And it's built on confrontation, getting all the best ideas out and being argued over, and then you pick the things that work. And I remember I'd start an argument with Grove. He'd say something, I'd say something, whatever. Probably he started it when I said something dumb. And then somebody else would jump in, and then Andy Grove would kind of back out and just let the argument continue, and he would cherry pick the best ideas. And one time I said to him after the meeting, I said, Andy, you and I, we're sitting here arguing in these meetings, and 4-letter words are used at times. I mean, it was pretty intense. And I'd say, if that was happening in my staff with the people who work for me, that'd be a red light, like something's not working. He looked at me and goes, you really think so? I said, yeah. I go, we should cool it down a little bit, maybe. I don't know. But it was a company that accepted that kind of behavior, but you were held accountable. You had to have data. You had to, it had to be deep. It couldn't just be one piece of data. There's no such thing as a straight line is one point. You had to have multiple points.
I want to talk about that for a sec. When you guys got in these fights, did everyone walk away butthurt, sad, crying, or were you adults, got over it, reconciled, and moved forward? Because we live in a completely different culture today than in the 80s and the 90s.
It's a little softer.
Just
a little bit.
Yeah. Can you talk about the psychology of that?
There was a fundamental thing. It said disagree and commit. We said that all the time. It was like when all this was over, no hurt feelings. You didn't necessarily always like everybody, but you respected them, and you were, and you go get it done. Whatever was decided was the way we were going to go.
And so often during these fights,
why do you call them fights? They're not fights. These were constructive confrontations.
Sounds like you're trying to start a fight, Hooman. Is that what's going on over here?
Apparently I am. Did the best ideas often come forth?
Oh, absolutely. And I can't believe. Is it different today? I mean, is everybody just patting each other on the shoulder and saying whatever?
No, but
I got to believe the same kind of thing goes on.
No, we live in a world where you can't offend anybody anymore.
Well, that's true. That's been a major change since the 70s and 80s.
Let's zoom out a little bit on some of the favorite products that you were able to bring to market, maybe some unique insights that you had when working with these teams around innovation, Mike.
Okay, I would say the best project, and it was a multiple year thing. It was 2 or 3 years long. Was when we got into the business of making products specifically for laptops. Laptops were just coming out. Compaq had already started shipping the first portable, which looked like I'm There was Singer sewing machines made a portable case that looked like a really big lunchbox, big round top and a handle. And that's what the first microprocessor-based portable computer looked like. It ran whatever, it wasn't Windows at the time, it was probably MS-DOS is all it was. We got into that business. A group of people under Dave House, who was my boss, got together and they did a study about what's the possibility here, what's the potential of this market, portable computers. And so that got us going, and we designed a product called the 386SL, which was designed to have lower power, more integration, would fit in, work with a battery-powered machine. That was probably the best project we ever had, but it was based upon a couple principles that I'd like to take a little credit for. I can't take credit for most of the things that have happened at Intel, but this one, we were very customer focused. We worked with a customer from day one. At the time, there was really not a lot of customers. I mean, nobody was the big deal yet in laptops. And it was Zenith Data Systems, and they were, I think it was Michigan, where they were headquarters. And their engineers and our engineers worked together constantly, because we didn't know what they knew and they didn't know what we knew. So we had a very heavy focus on working with the customer, knowing your market. It's indispensable, because if you don't start with knowing your customer and knowing the market, you don't know where you're going.
What are some practical strategies or applications of getting to know your customer? It's got to be deeper than just like product feedback, right?
Oh no, this was a working relationship. I mean, I would have meetings with the general manager in charge of that division. I would go there and we'd have joint reviews of what they were doing, what we were doing. It was just fundamental. That's how we were going to work, and the team bought into it. The team loved it. I mean, they got to talk to their customers. I mean, when you get into engineering, the thing that turns you on the most is when you see someone using what you designed. I mean, that's core to an engineer's heart. You go, hey, see that thing over there? I did that. Well, that kind of was what I built up in the enthusiasm in the group.
All right, so let's talk about like some of the biggest challenges you had. Can you tell us what they were, and maybe even some failures, things you couldn't overcome?
Well, I'll tell you, my first major job at Intel was a failure. I talked about this portable microprocessor debugging tool. And then my last project was Intel Online Services, which was, if you could picture what AWS is, we tried to do that in 2000, though we didn't have a clue, and it did not go well. We spent incredible amounts of money building data centers around the world, and then the first generation of the internet crashed, if anybody can remember that, in 2000, 2001. It was brutal. A lot of companies went out of business, and as did that project. So those were tough times.
Not enough demand, or?
Not enough demand, and not really a clear concept of what the market was, to be honest. Okay. In this case, companies weren't ready yet to give up their IT department. IT departments were important because they did a lot of custom code. They'd use maybe some tools from outside companies, and they'd want to keep control of those things. And so there was pushback. Whereas now, AWS, I mean, everybody uses, not everybody, but whether it's Microsoft or Amazon, in the cloud, IBM, somebody, they tend to use somebody else's data centers. So that was a big hit for it.
So tell us about like the joy of your job. Like what parts of your job and what things like are you so proud of and got the most kind of kudos for?
Well, I think what I said earlier, just seeing a product bloom and be successful. The laptop-based microprocessor was amazing. I mean, I ended up with relationships with, Compaq, Hewlett Packard, all the guys in Japan, Toshiba, NEC, IBM was also in Japan, and those were friendships and relationships I had with these other companies. But I mean, I kept doing that thing with talking to customers, maintaining customer relationships, giving them ideas of where our roadmap was going, and finding out if they liked that or not. What's it going to work for them? What's their feedback?
We had the CEO of GoodTime.io on the show about a year and a half ago, and he said when they hire a new employee, they'll have that employee working on site with one of their their top customers for 3 months. So when they come back, the product roadmap is not like, we think this is what the customer wants. So we know this is what the customer wants because we were with them. We understood their challenges. It sounds like you kind of had a similar approach to
Similar, not
co-creation.
quite as focused as that, but absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of take it for granted being in the Silicon Valley here, but the fact that you got to work with Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore, like these guys, just absolute behemoths. Like, what was it like to work with them? Did you know that you were in the presence of greatness? Give us a couple stories, Mike.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you got to work with these guys like Andy Grove, Noyce, and Moore, Moore was the most amazing one because most of us were just rabble-rousers. We just wanted to argue. We wanted to get the best things. And so we'd have these big arguments in executive staff, and Gordon would be sitting there, and he'd be just very quiet. And all of a sudden, in a mild voice, he would, with all the shouting going, with a mild voice, he would, well, I was thinking, and we'd all shut up, and we'd just look at him. Because you knew he had thought it over, and he was going to be right, because he was a really sharp guy. Grove was, the first time I met Andy Grove, we were at the Fall Joint Computer Conference, which turned into Comdex and then turned into the Consumer Electronics Show. But it was the early version of that. And we were showing off products. And I was showing off that little briefcase-based product I talked about earlier. And Grove comes storming through our booth. Why are all these Intel people here? Where are the customers? What's this? What's that? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I talked to him later. I said, you know, I'd been here for like 9 months, and here's my product, and I'm there trying to talk to people and customers and stuff, and you come storming through it. That wasn't very encouraging, you know. So,
Did he bite your head off, or
no, he would listen. He would definitely listen. He'd ask sharp questions back. Luckily, I got in there. I was more of a first-line engineering manager when I joined Intel, with a very small staff. We were a small team building this little laptop, suitcase-based thing. And I forgot where I was taking that one.
Well, you saw the.
I'm getting old.
No, you saw that. Well, you got an amazing story, so which we're lucky to have. So, round of applause for so far. So you've seen things change in the Valley. I mean, we're seeing the dynamic between Apple was championing closed source and OpenAI is doing well. You know, a lot of these companies are doing open source, like Meta, for example. It's maybe not one or the other, but it's the competition of the both that is driving proper innovation for the consumer. Do you have any feelings about where the market is generally headed, or what is your thought about open versus closed development?
You know, I don't know. I've never worked in the open environment, if you will. It was always, you know, proprietary products that I've worked with as tools. You know, I've written software, I've designed hardware, but it was never in that environment. So it seems to work. I don't know how it works. It's kind of like Wikipedia. You know, everybody just puts their 2 cents in, and I don't know how they keep it straight.
I think what ends up happening is that. When an organization like Meta is slightly behind the ball, what they'll do is essentially like what they call a scorched earth policy, where they're just going to make it free. And because of that, they can wipe out a lot of market value from the leader, and then it comes commoditized and kind of ubiquitous. And then applications get to be built on top of that. So if we think of like a giant redwood in the forest and it crashes, well, when that disintegrates, there's new sproutlings, new companies that can grow from that. So that's kind of like my understanding of the dynamic between the two.
You know, I was thinking more from the technical point of view. You know, like when you designed a huge software project, each person would have a module, and they'd have to get together and do a build of all the current versions,
right?
And then they'd have to agree on which changes they're going to make on the interfaces and all this technical stuff. Right. But you had to do that. So with open source, if it's open source and everybody's contributing to it, it's not something I've personally been involved with. So I just, now you're talking more about a marketing strategy.
No, I mean, with technology as well.
Yeah, but you're using the technology to succeed in the market.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
When James introduced you, are you following what Intel is doing today? Are you sort of aware of the landscape?
Yes, it's very unfortunate. I mean,
Yeah.
they're having a rough time, and it'll be interesting. I mean, this has got to
Give
be
us
the
give us an
biggest challenge
overview.
of the-
Yeah, give us an overview of what's happening and give us your thoughts so people understand.
Well, I mean, it's not the first time that Intel has, quote, risen from the ashes. We were getting our butts kicked in the dynamic RAM business back in the, would have been in the 70s. And we did a pivot from being a memory company to being a microprocessor company in the 80s. That was a major change of emphasis. We still did some memory products, but the company was betting itself on the microprocessor. And this was after the PC got announced. Okay, so that we could see that's where things were going. And that was great for me because I was into the smaller computers. Then in the mid 80s, we had for us, a massive layoff, 10, 15%, cut salaries, had various versions of working more and getting paid less. They had different names at the times. IBM bought 20% of the company, which kept us alive, but yet we were able to come back from that. So now we have a problem where Intel, the core process, the core value of the company was our process development, making the physics and the chemistry that made chips. Our microprocessors were how we got it to market, but that was our core competency, in my opinion, that just the magic that the company had. And we used to be 1 or 2 generations ahead of the world with shipping millions of products. TSMC has now surpassed Intel. They've somehow, Intel stumbled in that, and they've gotten past, so they have to fix that. They pretty much missed AI. They're trying to get back into AI. So there are a lot of things there that they have to work on. And I'm not an expert on it. I mean, I don't follow any companies very closely anymore.
Well, I mean, Intel did get $8.5 billion out of the CHIPS Act, so clearly they're in bed with the government. So you think it would be headed in the right direction? Like,
I hope so. I mean, obviously there's a few bright signs, but they're going to have to execute to earn that.
right.
And it's a steep climb. It's not I'm hoping it can happen.
When Intel moved towards a component industry or product, did that become more difficult to market, do you think? Like, they always say sell the sizzle, not the steak. So in this case, Intel is creating a product that goes into making the cake. So that's a little bit more difficult of a story to tell. How did Intel approach that unique challenge?
Good question. I mean, again, we looked at it, we said, hey, we got a problem. All these people are selling PCs, but nobody knows who we are. We make the microprocessor that's in it, but there's, disk drives in there, there's power supplies, there's keyboard. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. So we're selling an ingredient and we have no control here. So we went on a major campaign to establish our brand with the end user, getting back to the end user, not just. So in our case, we went through our customers, we learned about them to their customers. Again, it's that same theme, get to the market, get to the customers. And so we developed Intel Inside, which you've probably all heard too many times, that little ding, ding, ding thing. But it worked. I mean, it was like we created value in our brand, loyalty to our brand in the consumer, or both enterprise consumers and home consumers. Again, get to the customer.
I'm going to open it up here in just 1 second, but it sounds like you guys worship problems. You didn't care about success.
Yeah, we talked about that offline, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were very much a problem-solving company. If we weren't working on a problem, we weren't happy. There are even times where certain people were suspected of just creating problems to get everybody to focus. And I'm not kidding. It seemed that Andy Grove would decide every Christmas Eve that it's time to call everybody and tell them we got a problem. And so we all have to get together and talk about it. Thanksgiving, New Year's, whatever. So yeah, that's...
All right, we want to open it up to you fine folks. Does anyone have a question? All right, hold on. Could you pass this mic back to him?
And stand up and share a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Blakely. I'm a business consultant, and I just was curious about your perspective on the culture at Intel. Where you're saying that before these, I forget the term you use for the arguments that you guys are having.
Constructive confrontation.
Constructive confrontations, yes. Did you guys often have a segment of defining what the problem is before you had those constructive conversations about what the solution is to be it? I see a lot of times nowadays people are just arguing about the right way to go forward, but they're not even talking about what the problem actually is that they're trying to solve. So just curious if that was a part of the cultural process for you guys.
Oh, no, there's always a problem involved. We worship problems. Dave House, when he comes on, we put problems up on a pedestal and worship them. We just got that was what we wanted to see. So we were always looking for things that were going to get in the way, things that were going to cause problems, things that were already problems. And then now we're searching for the solution. But you start with a problem.
Cesar,
Good afternoon. Cesar Plata, I'm a startup founder. I love that campaign. It was, I think, over 15 years ago, the Intel Inside. It was very successful, but I haven't seen any Intel ads or anything like that in over 15 years. If it was so successful, why wouldn't they, from a marketing perspective, do something like this again?
Well, it's still, the Intel Inside program, I still see it once in a while. But it's not. It doesn't have the same power that it used to. The PC business has gotten fairly flat. It's not just exploding over and over and over again like it did in the 90s and early 2000s. But it's still there. But you don't see it as much. I agree with you.
Hi, my name is Mohit. I just want to understand, being an entrepreneur or starting a new business, Intel, wherever you find the Intel, it's always remind us about the Intel Inside. But nowadays, NVIDIA is going to capture more of the market of Intel. So I just want to know, being a startup founder, what are the things we have to keep in our mind while into the competitive world?
I think, so there's two examples. Intel didn't pivot well recently. They had some challenges, and I'm hopeful they'll get back together. Pat Gelsinger, who's the new CEO, brilliant man, and if anybody can do it, he can do it. So I'm hoping they can pivot. NVIDIA pivoted perfectly. They used to make graphics chips for plug-in boards for and then for video games. Them and ATI, they were the two people who argued back and forth about market share, and they early on just noticed, apparently, this is my opinion, that their design would work in AI because it was more based upon small little, processing units, lots of them, as opposed to one big core or maybe 8 cores, still not that many relatively. And they figured out that was their time to pivot. So when I talk about the memory to microprocessor for Intel, I think NVIDIA went from graphics, which they still do, they went from graphics to AI because they had the basic technology and they've developed tools, software, product. I mean, they appear to have an amazing lead on the basic hardware for that market. And so, I mean, they looked at the market, they saw what they had, and they went after it. And it appears to be, they're going to have some, they're going to be there for some time, in my opinion.
Before we get to the next question, clearly you have a lot of knowledge. Do you consult with startups? If somebody says, can we hire you? Can we bring you on? How does that work with you? Are you accessible?
I don't know. I mean, I did not even try. When I retired, I was done working. I'd been through enough business cycles. Oh, this is a cycle where we hire as fast as we can, This is a cycle where we cut back on expenses and travel. This is, I was kind of worn out. And so I just retired. And I got on the board of a couple startups. I was the only outside director. The rest were VCs who wanted to know the exit strategy, get their money back or more, or inside guys, the founders, and who were mostly technologists, always technologists. And they always had a great technical idea. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but they had a great technical idea, but no idea what to do with it. Amazing, smart people that had the technology, and they had no marketing, they had no channels, they had no custody. They just didn't understand how to get it out there. And
you can swear.
Yeah. So I did that twice, and I said, and then you go into a board meeting, end of the first quarter, the CEO comes in and goes, "Hey, kind of bad news. We missed we only got half of our forecast for revenue this quarter, but we're going to make it up in the next 3 quarters. And I'd say, you never make it up in the next 3 quarters. It doesn't work that way. You have to lower your ramp, be a little more conservative, cut back on hiring, oh no, we're going to keep hiring, we're going to keep spending. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to work. And it didn't. But I mean, and that's not fun. I mean, I'm here in a group of people who have 2 different agendas that aren't even in sync. And so no, after those 2, I decided, nah, I'm not interested. So it's like I took my name off the list, I guess.
Yeah.
Question on, so you've been at Intel for a really long time. So you've seen the company grow over time. So you must have been part of some of the hiring decisions or something. How do you judge what kind of people you want to hire? How do you make a decision when you're growing a team?
Well, you talk to them. You figure out what they've done, how they think. Will they fit in the culture? Because a lot of people came into Intel and didn't like the culture and left, primarily because of the culture was very in your face, okay? So you try, you test all those things, but you want to see what they're made of. Always ask another question. If you don't, if you get to a point where you're not sure, ask another question, So, and it depends. And again, there's a skill set. So this person you might be hiring them for marketing. That person, you might be hiring him or her for engineering or whatever. It's very specific to what the job is too. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Xander.
It's pretty straightforward.
Oh, wait. Your wife has somebody. Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name is Digvijay Singh. I was just curious, like Intel was so successful and then it wasn't. So what broke inside the organization so that it was not able to innovate? Like what happened?
I wasn't there when it happened. When I left in 2002, we were still running straight ahead we were still leading in process development and that. And at the time, we were struggling a bit. I will admit we were struggling a bit with what's going to happen next. So one of our CEOs, Craig Barrett, used the analogy of our business is so good and so profitable, it's like a creosote bush. He spent a lot of time in Arizona. And the creosote bush, as it grows, it basically poisons the ground around it so no other plants can grow there because it wants to get all the water, and there's not a lot of water in the desert. Now, we weren't in the desert, but the point was, as this thing got powerful, it wanted, it grabbed the control of the environment. And so that's the way he described to us what was happening at Intel. We had this multi-billion-dollar business. And 1 year, we would do a strategic review called SLRP, Strategic Long-Term Plan, for all our businesses once a year. And we would do that because we wanted to get our head out of the sand and try to find out where things are going because we're just enjoying what's happening. And we didn't do a good job of doing any sort of pivot as the PC business kind of flattened out a bit. We did well in enterprise. I think that they did well when they saw what was going on with data centers when you look at it from providing products, not from doing the data center yourself, but doing the products for data centers. We did a good job in that, or they did a good job in that. So they struggle with that. And it's hard. So how's Intel going to fund a startup? They're making billions of dollars, and you have a company or you have an idea for a startup, and if you don't make, I don't know, half a billion dollars within 2 years, you're meaningless to the bottom line. And that holds companies back when they're too successful, in my opinion. And I think most of us at Intel at the time.
Miss, go. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Grace. And first of all, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I turn myself off.
She's going to start again.
Take 2. My name is Grace, and want to just thank you for your time because that's a resource that you'll never be able to earn back.
Oh, thanks.
So my question is, what would you tell your younger self? And what would you tell your future self?
Is this a philosophy class? What's going on?
You have so many nuggets to share with us from your journey.
My younger self. I don't know that I would. I was so. I'll turn it around a little bit and say every now and then, it doesn't not like people are clinging to me or anything, far from it. But my daughters will bring home a young man and he'll say, Mr. Aymar, can you tell me how to get ahead? You did very well. I'd say, oh, well, thank you. Go to school, get smart, go to school in an area that's going to be, where there's a lot of jobs, and then get a job. Now you're going to be well set. You're going to have a good job in a good industry where you're going to be educated. Now you got to get lucky. So many, and you may not ever get lucky, but you have a good job and you can just find another job as the need becomes because you have a skill that's marketable. But if you don't get lucky, and you don't know when that good luck's going to happen. And so when it does happen, jump on it. And that's so there's very few people in my mind that didn't work out. That worked out that way for me. I went to work for Intel when it was a relatively small company. We were like number 8 or 9 in the world in terms of volume of just silicon chips. We eventually became number 1 for a while. So I think that's that's how I looked at it, and that's what I tell people. So the way my career turned out, I don't think I would do anything different, to be honest. I mean, I went to school, I got smart, I got a job, I got lucky. It's an important aspect that's pretty much uncontrollable. Unless you're just a super smart person like Steve Jobs, he created markets. I mean, in my mind, he was so focused on the market, he knew where the market was going to go before it did. And he was taking pride. He was like leading the receiver in a football game because he knows where that receiver's going, even though, he was amazing at that. Now, my future self, just be nicer to people. I still carry with me my very direct, very aggressive, very impatient personality, which worked great 8 hours a day for 26 years, or more than that. But I mean, whatever. Nothing to do with the job. Just be kind. I think at Intel there wasn't a lot of kindness. I mean, it was accepted that it was going to be aggressive and everything. It wasn't mean, but there wasn't a lot of thanks, if you will. I mean, in our culture at the time, in my opinion, and I probably was one of the worst at it.
Yeah, sir. Go ahead.
How's it going? I'm Xander, founder of XG Capital Strategies. I know you mentioned about TSMC outpacing basically Intel, but I was wondering if you have any insights in the current geopolitical environment. And today there was some news about Intel receiving a grant from the federal government to produce semiconductors domestically. What insights you might have into Intel's future in that regard?
Well, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know what Intel's future is there. I hope they can use that money to reestablish themselves a bit. But the fundamental problem is the world relies on this little island that China wants back. And if China decides to take it back, we can't make weapons, we can't make products, it's just amazing. So that's a problem. And so, excuse me, that's why the government's so interested in rebuilding the domestic manufacturing of semiconductors. It's pretty obvious. China's not going to say, oh yeah, sure, we'll still make your products for you. Like, yeah, you can still use our products in your jets and stuff. Right.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brinley. I'm here in the city of Palo Alto. I have a question for you in regard to, you've overseen and led and mentored a lot of people over the years. Personally, from a mirrored aspect, I'm asking you from your perception, how did you help others align with their roles? How did you help others become their best selves in their work, in their calling, in what they did? I ask this because I do this for youth on a daily basis. I work with kids from 10 to 18 on a daily basis for the city of Palo Alto, and I'm coaching them. I'm watching their parents, work day in and day out in the tech industry, and I see them experiencing what that looks like from a generational aspect. And so I would love to hear, maybe what you achieved and how you succeeded in that.
Well, I mean, you have to pick a good team. You have to, getting back to the recruitment thing, you have to, at Intel, you recruited internally. I mean, somebody was looking around for a job, you talk to them, and if you felt they were a fit and you could, they were going to work, and then you you're constantly giving him feedback and telling him, here's what you made. What mistake did you make there? Yeah, that's right. What mistake did you make there? And you just work with them on a daily basis. I would have what we called one-on-ones, which was just a meeting for an hour where the employee would come in, whatever department they were in, they'd have the agenda, what they were going to tell me, what happened in the last week. Did you make your key results or didn't you? And all that kind of stuff. So it was a constant focus on discipline, results, very much a focus on that. We had like 5 or 6 corporate values, but it was discipline and results were always right there at the top. That was what we were very much in engineering, because it was almost like you're, I don't want to say working like a computer, but you're debugging something, right? You're trying to say, this kid has it, this kid is going this way, or this person, nudge them along that way a little more, or maybe move them from this kind of project to a different kind of project. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's how you would do it how I would do it in industry.
You are. A lot of it is developing and creating things that best suit people, right? So, like you developed the briefcase system that then, became an ingenuity of the smaller Intel laptop. You gave an idea to someone that then was able to build a web out and forward and, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and that's what I would do. I've never written a book. I've never read any business books. You may have noticed that already. I didn't have to read any of Andy Grove's books because I lived those. I was indirectly, I was a subject of a few of his essays, I'm sure. But I just did things. I looked for the right pieces. I made sure that we were covering all the bases you had to cover. I was looking for problems ahead of time, not just sitting back saying, whoa, isn't this great? It was great, but you didn't spend too much time on that aspect. You say, where is it going to go wrong? How soon? How might it? And always looking at it. So you look for people with that same outlook, or you try to teach it to them.
So you mentioned the book, High Output Management and Objective and Key Results, OKRs. I know James would be upset if we didn't bring this up because it was kind of a piece of legendary history. Yeah, so help us understand.
I just said key results.
I know, but the whole high output, high output management, the pillars.
We didn't forget.
That's Dave House's talk. He's going to come do all that. Yeah, he'll talk about it. But basically it was the company would set up objectives and key results at the top level. The executive staff would get together and say, these are the areas we're focusing on as a company. And there weren't 50 of them. There weren't 30 of them. There were maybe 5. You would cut it back to the 5 most important, maybe 6 or 7, but you'd stop at 7. I'm just making up a number, but it's the right idea. And then that would filter down. You would then, in your organization, figure out what you had to do to support those, or which ones you could support, and then you do the same thing. 3 or 4 that were your objectives and key results in your level of the organization, and so on, down to the individual engineer or marketing person or HR person. Everybody in the corporation would have their key results, and that was what they committed to delivering in support of that whole infrastructure above. How did I do, James?
He loved it.
Thank you.
Meetings, decision making, and risk taking.
Risk-taking, the risk-taking was important, but I guess it was there a lot, but it never even thought to me like I was taking a risk. I was just doing the right thing. And in some cases, they were pretty risky. So, those were other values.
We have a question that it's
Deep Sani, one of the best deal flow in the Valley. Go ahead, Deep.
Hey, Mike. I got a chance to meet Robert Noyce when I was a kid. My dad helped increase yield on semiconductor wafers for IBM back in the day. So saw the industry being built up. It's really interesting how you talk about things being sort of direct and objective oriented. I think today there's a conversation that Brian Chesky has started about founder mode versus manager mode, and how he has gotten back to this idea of like retaining control, setting objectives, and then hiring people who can make evaluations and assessments against objectives, as opposed to giving folks like free rein across the organization. I hear a lot in what you're talking about that's similar to the way that Jensen talks about how he runs NVIDIA, and also Jobs talked about in terms of how he ran Apple. What's your sort of perspective on hiring people that can make an evaluation and make an assessment and take ownership on things versus being necessarily the smartest person in the room? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's well, you said assessment. I mean, you're hiring people who can handle it and get things done. They have to be smart, but smartness isn't the only thing they need. They need some savvy. There's something under your point under the founders versus the new. There are some founders who can make that jump, right? Who become the CEO, who become the super person. Gates, Jobs, Andy Grove, Noyce. Noyce had an amazing charisma, which at Intel wasn't. Everybody. It was like you thought you were the only guy in the room when you were talking to him. And I'm sorry, I keep saying guy and him and all that, and that's probably a sign of my age and the era I grew up in.
We're not offended. Everyone loves it. Keep talking the way you talk.
Yeah. But I said that to my staff a few times. There are some women, mostly men, and I'd say I use the word guys. It means everybody in this room. It doesn't mean men only, but it's I don't know. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question or even understanding it, but I think it's. You don't know for sure which way to. It all depends on the personnel. Some people hit a wall as founders, and they then have to hire the team that's going to succeed them, and have to understand that. Other people can take it. A lot of people try to make that jump, from what I've seen, and don't do a very good job of it. But I think it's maybe more often that's the case, in my opinion.
Let me rephrase it. If constructive confrontation wasn't a part of Intel's culture, do you think it would have innovated the way it did?
That's a really good question. I can't see how, but it's possible. I mean, there are some companies that have a big kinder environment, and they're successful. Hewlett-Packard, I think, that brilliant guy, Hewlett-Packard were leaders, but that company was a very, I don't know how to describe it. They didn't have that level of aggressiveness, and yet they were able to succeed. I spent a few years there when I was still in college. So,
did you get to meet these guys?
Which guys? No, I never met. I never got. I was just a entry-level college student working part-time, so I never met any of the top guys there.
All right, we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
I'll try to ask a useful last question. I'm Chip Krauskopf. It's good to see you again, Mike. You had a very successful career. You managed a lot of different organizations. You mentioned the small diagnostic computer. You ran software. You did big systems. You did semiconductors. What can you share about how you were able to move across those very technical domains and still have successful results?
Good question. I taught myself earlier. I learned early, and then I had to teach myself, be a lateral thinker. I talked earlier about marketing. Whatever it takes for you to be successful in the project you're working on, look out every door and window that surrounds that's important to you, and make sure it's there. So I was very much a generalist, very much a lateral thinker. I was never a great engineer. I could make things work, but mostly I'd throw it against the wall, and if it stuck, great. If it didn't, I'd fix it and fix it and fix it. So I wasn't one of these super smart engineering minds, which you probably already know. I was a generalist, and I think that being a generalist and looking at the big picture, lateral thinking, very fundamental.
Well, we are so honored to have had a Silicon Valley legend, Mike Aymar. So thank you so much, Mike, for having us here. Also want to do another quick shout out to the Park James for having us for this evening. And of course, thank you to Nicodex and Primero Negocios for sponsoring. So for more of the best brains, tune in to siliconzombies.com, and we'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thanks for coming out. All right.